Football fans, after 222 days without meaningful football, the Washington Commanders are finally back, and they kicked off their 2026 campaign with a 20-7 victory over the Miami Dolphins in a rainy preseason opener. But beyond the final score, there is an enormous amount worth unpacking from this game. An undrafted rookie running back who quietly turned in the single best performance on the entire field. A genuinely fascinating quarterback situation developing behind an injured veteran. A defense that dominated without even showing its real defensive scheme. And a former top prospect whose lack of production is starting to genuinely concern close observers of this team. So settle in, because we are breaking down every single storyline from this preseason opener. Let's start with some genuinely important big-picture context before diving into individual performances, because that opening offensive possession looked genuinely rough for this team, and it is worth understanding exactly why. All of the off-season talk about this being the most competitive training camp in recent memory simply did not translate onto the field during that specific opening drive. This team did not look particularly ready for live tackle football, though it is worth remembering that modern training camps simply do not feature players tackling fully to the ground anymore, even during padded practice periods. In some ways, you could have put together nearly any team in the league and seen a similarly rough opening sequence against live, full-speed tackling for the first time in months. As the game progressed, the overall talent gap between these two rosters became increasingly apparent, and while that specific opening drive was not exactly encouraging, it is not something worth genuinely panicking over either. It is also important to understand that the defense on display during this specific game bore very little resemblance to what fans should actually expect once the regular season begins. This is not simply about key players being unavailable due to injury or rest. It is specifically about the scheme itself. According to the offensive coordinator's own pregame comments, he intended to show 0% of his actual offensive playbook during this contest, and by most accounts, this team's defense actually revealed even less of its true defensive identity than that offense did. The soft, passive, sit-back zone coverage on display throughout this game is simply not representative of what this new defensive coordinator's actual scheme looks like. And remarkably, despite playing that deliberately vanilla, conservative version of the defense, this unit still managed to come away with 3 total interceptions. So for anyone feeling genuinely concerned about what they saw defensively, it is safe to set those worries aside for now. Now shifting over to specific game notes, rookie safety Sonny Styles wore the green dot communication device during this contest, and while he did not necessarily stand out statistically, there is important context worth considering. During that rough opening defensive sequence specifically, the interior defensive line was consistently getting pushed backward, which limited the opportunities for the linebackers behind them to actually play downhill and make plays at the line of scrimmage. Despite that difficult situation, there were no communication breakdowns or blown coverage assignments traced back to Styles. And he deserves genuine credit simply for properly relaying the defensive calls throughout that opening sequence. On the flip side, the offensive line looked genuinely troubling to open this game. It remains to be seen whether this was simply a rough first drive occurrence, or a legitimate concern given that this specific position group had been considered one of this roster's strengths heading into camp. A couple of specific offensive linemen had rough individual reps during that opening stretch, including one lineman who appeared to struggle with his overall athleticism on a specific rep, and another who got driven back several full yards after taking on a blitzing linebacker. It remains too early to draw firm conclusions from a single preseason drive, but this is certainly a situation worth continuing to monitor closely as camp progresses. Now let's address the situation surrounding backup quarterback Marcus Mariota, because he unfortunately left this game with a knee injury, and hopefully he ends up being perfectly fine. It remains unclear exactly when the injury actually occurred, whether on the specific play where he took a significant hit after delivering a genuinely impressive throw down the field. or on the very next play as he turned to hand the football off. Regardless of the exact moment it happened, he was forced to exit the game, leading directly into an extended stretch of quarterback Sam Hartman struggling mightily. Hartman has simply not looked like an NFL-caliber quarterback throughout multiple recent preseasons, and this game unfortunately continued that same troubling pattern, including an interception and a play where he badly missed an open receiver in the end zone before ultimately taking a costly sack instead. When a quarterback struggles that significantly, it becomes genuinely difficult to fairly evaluate any of his surrounding skill position players, since they simply are not getting a fair opportunity to make plays. But then rookie quarterback Ethan Kalmanis entered the game, and the difference was immediately dramatically noticeable. Kalmanis clearly possesses more raw arm talent than Mariota, a claim that should not require much convincing after actually watching this specific performance. He has certainly shown some inconsistency throughout training camp, occasionally attempting overly ambitious throws he probably should not, but the sheer arm talent has never been in question. He finished this game completing 6 of 10 passes for 87 yards, and arguably should have finished with even better numbers had a couple of his receivers properly secured catchable passes. If Mariota's injury ends up being genuinely serious, Kalmanis has at minimum shown he possesses real, legitimate starting-caliber physical tools worth continuing to develop. There were several other individual performances worth specifically highlighting from this game as well. Linebacker Tyler Owens continued getting moved around defensively as this coaching staff searches for the ideal way to fully unleash his unique skill set, showing flashes defending the run, dropping into coverage, and getting physical with tight ends throughout this contest. Cornerback Antonio Hamilton had a genuinely rough moment early in the game, getting beaten badly on a big completion. But he settled in significantly after that specific play and played much better throughout the remainder of the contest. On special teams, both kickers connected on their respective field goal attempts, offering encouraging early signs in that specific competition, even though one of those makes came after benefiting from a fortunate bounce off the upright. Now let's shift into the official 5 names to remember from this specific game. Using the full color grading scale, dark green representing a true game-changing standout performance, green representing a solid winning contribution, yellow representing some genuine concerns worth monitoring, and red representing a performance that actively cost the team. The first green of the night goes to rookie quarterback Ethan Kalmanis. His clear arm talent was on full display throughout this contest, and he looked genuinely composed and in command once he entered the game. He delivered a couple of particularly impressive throws, including a well-placed, tightly delivered pass on a difficult 3rd and long situation that unfortunately was dropped by his intended target. Combined with everything he has shown throughout training camp, this specific performance offered real, tangible evidence that his upside genuinely exceeds what Sam Hartman currently offers this roster at the quarterback position. The second green of the night goes to defensive lineman Ricky Barber, who recorded a sack during this contest, along with a couple of additional quarterback pressures throughout the game. He appeared to get progressively stronger as this specific contest wore on, a genuinely encouraging sign suggesting he may have outgrown some of the lower-level competition he had previously been working against throughout training camp, positioning himself as a legitimate candidate for expanded playing time as this preseason continues. Unfortunately, the next grade belongs in the yellow category, and it goes to defensive lineman Johnny Newton. Despite entering this specific game with real expectations to have a genuinely strong showing, he simply did not separate himself from the rest of the depth chart in any meaningful way. This is a player who entered the league with legitimate first-round caliber talent, and there remains real belief in his underlying ability. But at this specific stage of his career, the persistent lack of consistent, translatable production on the field is becoming a genuinely fair source of concern. He finished this game with only a couple of total tackles and no real impact plays to speak of, continuing a frustrating pattern that has unfortunately followed him throughout much of his young career so far. The next green of the night, and arguably the single standout performance of this entire game, belongs to undrafted rookie running back Robert Henry Jr. He finished this contest with 12 carries for 75 total yards, including an explosive 22-yard touchdown run and multiple additional runs that gained 10 or more yards. He was consistently the more explosive, more decisive running back on the field throughout this entire contest, showing purposeful, intentional cutting ability rather than any wasted movement, and he even flashed real value in pass protection, successfully picking up a blitzing defender on one specific play. While he still faces a genuinely uphill battle to actually make this 53-man roster given the overall depth at this position, this specific performance forces a real, serious reconsideration of his overall chances moving forward. And finally, the last green of this recap goes to new defensive coordinator Dante Jones. Despite operating with an intentionally vanilla, conservative version of his actual defensive scheme throughout this entire contest, this defense still managed to surrender only a single touchdown across the entire game, while forcing 3 total interceptions in the process. That kind of ball-hawking, opportunistic performance directly reflects an emphasis on takeaways that this coaching staff has consistently preached throughout this entire offseason, and seeing that specific philosophy translate into real, tangible results, even in a deliberately restrained defensive game plan, represents a genuinely significant, positive departure from this same team's brutal preseason performance a year ago, when they were outscored by a combined margin of over 70 points across 3 total preseason games. So there you have it, football fans, a genuinely comprehensive breakdown of the very first Washington Commanders game action of the 2026 season. An undrafted rookie running back who might have just forced his way into serious roster consideration. A backup quarterback battle that took a genuinely fascinating turn following Marcus Mariota's injury. A defense that dominated statistically while barely revealing its true defensive identity. And a former top prospect whose continued lack of production is becoming an increasingly difficult storyline to ignore. This preseason opener offered plenty of genuine reasons for optimism, even while leaving a handful of legitimate concerns worth continuing to monitor as camp progresses. So now it is your turn, and we genuinely want to hear what you think about everything covered in this recap. Did Robert Henry Jr. do enough tonight to genuinely change your expectations about his chances of making this final roster? Are you growing increasingly concerned about Johnny Newton's continued lack of production heading into his 3rd season? And how confident are you feeling about Ethan Kalmanis as a legitimate developmental option behind Marcus Mariota? Drop your own personal 5 names to remember down in the comments section below, because we absolutely love hearing what all of you think. If this recap helped you get fully caught up on everything from this preseason opener, do us a favor and smash that like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach even more passionate fans just like yourself. And if you have not already subscribed, now is the perfect time, because we are going to be right here bringing you every single game recap and every bit of behind-the-scenes coverage all the way through this incredibly compelling season. Thanks so much for watching, and we will catch you in the very next update. Hail to the Commanders.